Welcome to Marx and Vincentielli, the podcast about theater and only theater, just theater, exclusively theater, theater.
And also about Elizabeth Vincentielli and Peter Marx, because I'm Peter Marx, former chief theater critic of the Washington Post, but still deeply immersed in all things theater.
And I'm Elizabeth Vincentielli, and I'm Peter's other better half on a purely professional level, of course. I write for the New York Times about theater and sci-fi and movies and skiing and camping and Lord knows what else. Pretty much everything they'll throw at me, I'll do, but mostly theater. So today's guest, you may not know his name, although if you're listening to us, there's a good chance you do, but I guarantee you know his work. Our guest today is Jeffrey Seller, who's a producer with some very high-profile Broadway credits to his name. Little show called Rent, little striver called Avenue Q, little something called In the Heights, a little something else called Hamilton. So it's not too shabby, I would say.
Not at all. And today, Jeffrey is with us to talk about his new memoir, Theater Kid. No kid anymore, but still a theater kid at heart. The book just came out from Simon & Schuster. It takes us from his childhood, growing up just outside of Detroit, to that wonderful interlude that many theater lovers have at theater camp, and then studying at the University of Michigan. And it also details his move to the Big Apple and the tale of his working his way to the top of the theater industry. And
he's kept busy since Hamilton. I mean, he was the producer for the revival of Sweeney Todd. Was it last season? I think it was last season with Josh Groban.
Yeah, with Josh Groban and Annalee Ashford.
Yes, so he was behind that. And one of my favorite bits in the book, which we're going to talk about with him, his first big theater job when he was in New York, when he was in his early 20s, was he was working in Fran and Barry Weissler's office. Now, they are kind of legendary figures on Broadway. They made a mint with the revival of Chicago, but they were very busy before that, and Jeffrey worked in their office. I also learned in the book, it's all in the book, so I'm not really being prurient, but maybe a little bit, that Jeffrey lost his virginity to his college roommate, who was Andrew Lippa, who our listeners also know because he went on to write musicals like One of the Wild Parties and Big Fish and The Addams Family. So that's a nice little piece of gossip in there. It's in the book, so I'm not I'm not gossiping. I'm just summarizing. But it's actually very frank, the book, in many aspects, which led to some completely insane text between Peter and me. So I will spare you those.
I understand, Elizabeth. You're just providing a public service. That's what you're in the business of.
Absolutely. I'm like Goodreads.
Yeah. So with that in mind, let's welcome Jeffrey to the podcast. Jeffrey Seller, hello.
So, Jeffrey, I'm going to start with a very, very easy question. What makes a good producer for our listeners? Because I'm not sure what makes it's not just about having the money to invest. Like, what is a good producer to you?
What makes a good parent?
Oh, okay. No, you can't do that question back at me. I will not.
Because, I've been thinking a lot about this through this process. And in so many ways, my shows, my musicals are my children. And I'm raising them. How do I, as a parent, nurture? How do I praise? When do I praise? How do I suggest? How do I recommend? How and when do I criticize? When is it appropriate to say, can we do better? Can you do better?
Have you had moments where you thought you went through drafts and rehearsals and workshops and all that, and it's still not working. Like, is that the hardest thing? I mean, have you had to pull the plug on something and say, I'm sorry, I just can't do it, I'm out? You don't have to name names, but
You know what? I ceased development on a new musical a year ago. And it was a musical I'd been working on and off since before COVID. And the process was not linear. I felt like the show would make a step forward and then it would make a step back. And it had some wonderful songs, some powerful emotion. And yet I couldn't see a future for it. I couldn't figure out, I couldn't see that ultimately this was going to compel people to have to see it. I didn't feel the story was big enough.
is it a hard decision to?
It was such a painful decision because I had to go to a book writer, a lyricist, a composer, a director, and say, I am not going to develop this anymore. And I did it with great pain, but I knew in my gut that it's not getting better. It's not inspiring. It's not thrilling me. And therefore I got to stop because I think the future is going to be one filled with regret and sadness.
Okay, well, that's a really interesting place to start and now I want to, I'm going to invoke a Lin-Manuel Miranda line, rewind. We're going to rewind here to the very beginning, Jeffrey Seller. And I have to say, I was there at the beginning with
yes,
you.
you were, Peter.
There were dinners at Osteria El Doge with you and your partner at the time, Kevin McCollum.
Yes.
Your business partner, and I was there at the moment your big breakthrough Rent happened, and I wonder, and you're one of those producers, Jeffrey, who's had these remarkably huge impact shows all through in each decade that we've lived through since Rent, and I wonder, you just spoke about that intuitive feeling with a show that wasn't going forward. What was the opposite like for you when you had almost no experience producing, very little, but you had this faith in a show that had many weird turns and tragic ones? But what was it? Where did that come from, Jeffrey? That sense of knowledge that a producer needs to be able to guide a production to its best possible life.
Maybe it was naivete. Maybe it was being young and having a attitude of damn the torpedoes. Maybe it was reckless. The truth is, I didn't know if Rent would work. I knew that I loved those characters and those songs were making the hair on my arms stand up. Those songs were thrilling me. And of course, Jonathan and I talked about doing Rent in a garage for, where we could set up 350 folding chairs. We had no idea in those early phases that it might go to Broadway. Better yet, run for 12 years on Broadway and tour for the better part of the next 25 years.
Sure.
No idea whatsoever. I just knew I loved it, and I was fighting for Jonathan's vision.
Do you think you would have continued in the business if Rent hadn't worked? It was so traumatic, the beginnings of Rent, with Jonathan's death right before opening night, which remains a story that is told again and again. It's become theater lore.
Yeah.
But did the magnitude of that success have some outsized impact on your self-belief, in your notion that you really actually had the right talents to be a producer. Did you think that having that early success was a determining factor in making this a career as opposed to going on and doing something else in the business?
100%. Rent changed my life forever. Because before Rent, I was a booking agent who wanted to be a producer.
Right.
And after Rent, I was a producer who happened to own a booking agency.
Interesting.
But I want to say something else, Peter. Forget about me. Rent changed Broadway forever.
Mm-hmm. True.
And I don't think we can know how arid the Broadway landscape might have been had it never benefited from Rent. Because we know with hindsight, there's no In the Heights without Rent. And if there's no In the Heights, there's no Hamilton. There's no Avenue Q without Rent.
Right.
Right? Because Kevin and I wouldn't have been there to do it.
Right.
And no one else was there to do it. And I don't think there's any Next to Normal or Dear Evan Hansen or any of these terrific contemporary musicals without Rent.
Yeah, it takes those kind of watersheds to propel the whole form forward. That we need those cornerstone shows. Without them, the landscape is unexciting. And if you don't have that kind of thrill and inspiration that spreads the joy to other creative people to think about how they can make this work, I dare say that you're absolutely right. It would be a much more impoverished form without. You need that level of hit and of artistic success for people to feel like this remains a pursuit they want to engage in.
Yeah, but what is so remarkable is Jonathan had a vision. I want to write stories for my generation and music of my generation. I want to write characters that are like my friends. And he succeeded, and he achieved his goals. Not just for Rent, but for the entire American musical.
It's funny that we're in a kind of sliding doors moment of like, what if Rent had not happened? What did it create? Because so you were having dinner with Peter, but like I saw Rent, and I can't remember if it was still in previews or after the opening, but I saw it because I was, you can get tickets at New York Theater Workshop. So a friend and I were volunteer ushers. The workshop still does. So we were volunteer ushers, and it was packed. So we sat on the stairs inside the theater. We watched it from there. And I got to tell you, I hated it so much that it's a good thing that I'm not a producer, because but I've come around to it. But my first impulse at the time was just like, oh my God, this is again why I'm not a producer, because I was like, this will never go anywhere. And like, you cannot be any more wrong on everything, than that initial take on the show. And I've been on the wrong side of history so many times that I think it's actually my nickname at home, like wrong side of history, Elizabeth. But I think on this one, I really was, regardless of what I thought about it. Do you have times when you think, okay, this show is not my personal thing, or does it have to have that emotional thing for you? Like, are you able to separate? Like, okay, as a business person, as I can tell this is going to do well. It's not my jam, but I can tell it's going to work. Or do you have to love it from, you know what I mean?
I never know if it's going to do well. And I only can adopt this child, if I feel something inside of me, in my guts, in my kishkas. Only if I'm feeling something very deeply about it can I take it on and do it. And I always like to say, I only can please myself. I try as hard as I can to guide, lead, nurture, criticize, to make the best show that will please me. And then I hope the audience will come along, but I don't know. And I don't think I don't know if one can ever say, oh, this is not for me, but I think it'll do well, so I should produce that. I think people have lost a lot of money engaging in that conversation with themselves.
Actually, do you mind if we rewind a little bit more? Because one of the things that I really like about the book is that trajectory that you trace from, growing up. I love that your first trip to your first Broadway shows were Dreamgirls.
Yes.
A few weeks after that insane Tony, win for Jennifer Holliday, and Torch Song Trilogy, which of course in hindsight but even then are like two huge influential shows. And you see them on the same trip. I think it's the same trip to New York, right?
100%. The first time I ever come to New York at age 17.
It blows me away. So, and then you go to University of Michigan and you study political science, but you were already very involved in theater.
Yes.
And you're directing.
Yes.
And then you move to New York, and I love the thing about you working in the office of Fran and Barry Weissler, and that's before Chicago. Can you tell us a little bit about working in the transit? Because you're working in their booking side of their business, which I think is something we don't talk about enough, but it's a huge part of the industry, touring. I'm really curious as to how that's changed, if it has changed in the years when you were doing it. Most people, that's how they see Broadway shows.
Yes.
On the road when they hit their city. What was it like to work in that office with the Weislers?
Chaotic, thrilling, tense, high-pressured, and nerve-wracking, and incredibly educational. I mean, Barry, I think Barry used to walk around going, "You should pay me for everything I'm teaching you." But I was 22 years old when I got that job, and Fran Weissler said to me, "Well, you know nothing about the theater, darling, but it's not your fault. You're only 22." And of course, I had the arrogance of the kid who had just produced these shows at school and directed shows. But I thought I knew a lot about the theater until she said, "You don't know anything." And then that was when she said, "Well, you can't work for me or Barry because you don't know enough, but maybe you can work in our booking division." And I didn't even know what a booking division was. Little did I know that when our shows tour all over America, and there's 100 cities they go to.
Right.
They require this booking agent who's a middleman in between the producer who makes the show in New York and the presenter who's putting it on in Cleveland, Spokane, Kansas City, Albuquerque, Phoenix, Costa Mesa. It's a job that requires salesmanship, negotiation, and organization. And it's the least glamorous job in the office, right? The more glamorous job is assisting Barry as he's putting on Gypsy starring Tyne Daly, or Topol and Fiddler on the Roof, which were their big shows before they did Chicago. My job is to work in that office planning the tour. But what I could do is work by day, booking these shows and learning every single theater in America and learning exactly how all the deals work. While at night, I'm going off to see Jonathan Larson's new show and making friends with Jonathan and sending him a letter saying, "I want to produce your shows." And I'm literally producing and directing a new musical by Andrew Lippa and his friends at Road of Shalom on West 83rd Street. So I'm doing, and I'm eating my dinner, which is a sandwich and some carrots on the C train on the way from the office on 46th Street to the temple on 83rd Street. I'm literally getting on the train, gobbling up my sandwich, and then going off to rehearsal at night.
I remember going into Fran and Barry's office in the 90s when I was doing the theater column, and I walked by a desk, and there was this guy sitting there, and Fran said, "Oh, hi, David." And she said, that's David Stone. Hi, darling. And she said, "Don't mind him. He's just putting his toe in the water to see if he can do this stuff." David Stone later went on to produce Wicked. And, of course, Kimberly Akimbo, among many other things. But it really was this apprenticeship office. It's one of those places where you all learned the mechanics of what you do. Very few of you, I dare say, rose to the level of what you and David Stone have done. But I'm wondering, as you're talking, Jeffrey, and I'm thinking about where you started, which was where I started, in the sense of loving the theater as a kid, imagining myself in the theater in some role, but never in my wildest dreams did I think of producing. It's such a rare skill to me to be a great producer, to have not only the technical understanding of what a producer does, which you obviously gleaned in those early days of, booking was probably an essential tool you learned, but also having taste, acquiring the taste to know yourself and in your gut what might work and what might not. But that self-belief that you could be a producer is so, it's just not a widely held aspiration in this culture. What was that in you that made you move in that direction?
Peter, I have a very distinct memory. I'm in the 8th grade. I am in my youth theater production of The Adventures of Popcorn Pete, and I'm playing the Jack in the Box. And it's great fun. I really love being in this play, and I'm as an 8th grader, I'm vivid. I can make a double take. I have sense of comic timing. I'm pretty good. But I remember I had 3 thoughts after we had done our little 6 shows. 1, that is a stupid title. 2, this play isn't very good. Nothing really happens in the 60 minutes that transpire on this stage. And 3, no one's coming to see it. I grant you, it's February, it's Michigan, there's a lot of snow on the ground, people are interested in other things. And that was when I raised my hand and said to the advisor, who picks the plays we're doing? And I like to say that was my first step.
I love it.
Toward becoming producer. Because what is the single most important decision I make?
Right.
To pick the play.
Of course.
And of course, after Mrs. Janney, the parent advisor, said the play reading committee picks the plays, I was like, I'm going to be on the play reading committee. I don't know how many kids at age 14 and 15 want to sit around reading reading plays. But I loved reading plays. And that's where I started to acquire the skill of analyzing what makes a play compelling, entertaining, rewarding, and what makes a play boring.
So Rent is your first, it's a huge show. I mean, it really is a huge show, and it very influential, as you said. And then you continue on, mention some of the other, little shows you've done, like Avenue Q and In the Heights and Hamilton, that I'm pretty sure all of listeners have heard of. How do you think producing has changed in the decades that you've been doing it? Is it, the bottom line, is it still the same? Or let's talk just on Broadway. Or do you think there have been kind of structural changes?
If we go back even to William Goldman's book, The Season from 1967, I mean, by then he's saying it's the end of the era of the American producer, and he's listing all the great producers of the plays of the 60s and the 50s and how they've all retired except for Hal Prince, right?
Right.
And Robert Whitehead, right? They're like, everyone's gone except for Prince and Whitehead. Of course, Robert Whitehead being a great producer of plays, and Hal. And if we go back, you have 2 colossal producers of the 60s in Hal Prince and David Merrick, and their rivals. And Hal is the producer of the mega hit of 1964, Fiddler on the Roof, and Merrick is the producer of the great other hit of 1964, Hello, Dolly. They don't compete for the Tonys because, they're opening on opposite ends of the year. So I think they both win the Tony in their 2 years. But you have Hal and you have David Merrick, and they are both of the singular producer school,
Yeah.
in which one man is the president and CEO,
Right.
and assembles his team and raises the money and runs his business. And then you could, and then that starts to change a little bit in the 70s. You get Mike Nichols presenting Annie, although he had he didn't raise one penny for Annie, by the way. All these other guys raised the money, and his agent, Sam Cohn, raised the money. And Mike kind of was the artistic advisor to Marty Charnin and the writers of Annie. And then, of course, and then, to some degree, you have Stigwood, who produces Andrew Lloyd Webber's early shows, who is some hybrid of a theater producer, a music producer, and a movie producer. And then, of course, out comes Cameron
McIntosh.
And then Cameron completely revitalizes the notion of the singular producer in the 80s with, doing Cats with Andrew, and then in quick succession, Les Mis, Phantom, and Saigon. Now, in so many ways, I decided to become a sole practitioner 10 years ago because I just wanted to do my shows and make the decisions myself.
Right.
Collaborate with the authors myself, and then let the chips fall where they may. I will succeed, I will fail, we will have successes, we will have failures, but I need to do it on my own. And fortunately, my success with Rent and Avenue Q and In the Heights gave me that ability. And that I realized to be lucky and unique. Because what we do know is that, to some degree, the producer has broken off into a million pieces these days, where it takes so much money to raise the it takes so much capital to put on the show that producers take on multiple partners.
Right.
And the danger when you do that is that if multiple people are speaking to a creative team, that could be the director or the authors, as soon as more than one person's talking, they tune out everybody.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm a sole practitioner, and that's why I do less.
So you've touched on the third rail of theater going these days, and that is the idea of money and what it costs. And you also mentioned Cameron McIntosh, who I spoke to recently in London, and he was talking about how he was going to produce Oliver in the West End, and it would cost him about £4 million. And he said, if I want to do Oliver in New York, it's going to cost me $18 million. And the question becomes, Jeffrey, and the one that everyone listening to this podcast will be waiting for is, the costs seem so high now, translated into very high ticket prices for people to want to experience as much theater as they can. You and I had the advantage, even though you came from humble means. I came from a middle-class family, but we could afford to go to a lot of Broadway. What's going on? Why are we in this upward spiral that feels prohibitive? And then we look at some of the numbers, and people gasp. Not always, and not every show, but what's your take on the economics right now of Broadway?
I think I could argue that we're in deep trouble. And I think I could argue that nothing has changed and we're going to continue to have successes and failures with equal results. So why don't I start with the positive? Peter, we would have had this exact same conversation 29 years ago when Broadway had the audacity to charge $65 for a full price ticket. And the year that Rent opened on Broadway, in which $65 was the top ticket price, Broadway did I think a little bit less than 9 million people in attendance. Broadway is on track right now to do 13 million people this season, which will be our best season since 1819, the season prior to COVID, right? In 1819, I think we may have touched 14 million people, and that was like our best season ever, like since like the 30s or something. So attendance has been up, and attendance is up this season, and consumers are finding a multiplicity of ways to find a ticket that's less than $229 or $169. They are finding through the discount systems tickets that are $20, tickets that are $69, tickets that are $50. Attendance is up. The number of musicals, as you folks know, is like, there's like 10 or 11 new musicals this season.
More.
And do you know what? In the season just prior to Rent, 1994-95, there are 2 musicals that are nominated for Best Musicals, and they are
Sunset Boulevard?
Sunset Boulevard, and do you know what the other one was?
Was it? I'm trying to remember. I did know, but now I forget.
Smokey Joe's Cafe.
Oh my God! Right.
Which is a review.
Right.
And Sunset Boulevard wins the Tony for Best Score and Best Book by default. There is no other nominee.
Right.
Not one. And then, of course, it wins the Tony for Best Musical, but it only has one competitor, which is a review of Lieber and Stoller songs. So what does that tell us about where Broadway is relative to 1994-95, when we have like 12 new musicals this year, and our attendance is going to be approximately 45% higher than it was in 94-95.
All right, now give me the other side.
Great. On the other side, I'm going to tell you, I shudder at the notion that when I produce my next original musical, it's going to cost $20 million. I've never raised $20 million in my life. When I did Sweeney Todd only 2 years ago, big show, big orchestra, big cast, it only cost $13 million. And it was still $13 million for a revival. And happily, it was a hit. And everything went perfectly. And we paid off $13 million and we made like a 20% profit.
Wow.
But that was 13 million. 20 is 50% more than 13.
What is that? Is that labor cost?
What is it? Yeah, what is it? Where is it from?
You know what it is? Everything has gone higher. The costumes, the props, the perishables, the batteries, the set. Oh my God. The set, the cost of building a set after COVID went up 50% for all the materials. And as we know, Broadway doesn't receive any benefit from technology or productivity, because at the end of the day, I still have to employ those 26 musicians for Sweeney Todd, the 34 actors for Sweeney Todd, the huge stage crew. I still have to load that. I cannot get any efficiencies. So the combination of the inflation from COVID and post-COVID, plus the normal raises in salaries, has created this world where now it's $20 million to make that musical.
And are the rentals of the theaters going up?
Yeah, the rentals are up too. Of course they are. That's what the perishables, because those lights eventually burn out. They have to get new ones.
I mean, for the theater rental.
Oh, well, their percentage hasn't gone up, but... You
mean their percentage of the box office?
When they say it's 5%, 6%, it hasn't gone to like 7, 8, 9.
I see.
But
6%
of a bigger number is still a bigger number.
Got it.
So I shudder at 20 million, because here's the other truth. If you remove the profitable Hamilton, Lion King, and Wicked from the system, and then you say, okay, MJ's been a reasonably good hit, there hasn't been one other since MJ.
Right. Wow.
Like Moulin Rouge hasn't really made that much money on Broadway. And none of them are hits. Not one. None of these producers are making any money. And though you can bring George Clooney to Broadway for 14 weeks and you can recoup the $7 or $8 million, those producers aren't going to make any money. They're going to make a 20% return. They're going to make, they're going to chalk up a couple $1,000,000. But that billion, did you see the 50 names above the title? Divide $2,000,000 by those 50 people and tell me they all can go for dinner at Orso after the show.
And also, it's not going to tour, or it's not going to, because there's that too. You have to think, okay, what's the afterlife? Can I make some money touring? Is touring for a show a big part of the income that you can kind of count on, for instance? Or is it how?
Of course. Rent made far more money in touring than it actually did on Broadway. And I assure you, Cameron made far more money on Les Mis touring than he did on Broadway, even though Rent made a lot of money on Broadway and Les Mis made a lot of money on Broadway. So when you make a musical that becomes a business, you are making money from you're making money on Broadway, you are making money in the West End, you are making money on tour. And it's flowing from every single one of those sources. But here's the deal. If you have a show on Broadway that flops and you go out on tour, your tour may do well. But you're not going to recoup Broadway from it.
Right.
So I'll give you an example. That musical from last season, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the name. All the Light We Cannot See. No, what was the name? That musical based on the John Green novel.
The Notebook.
Thank you.
The Notebook.
Yeah. So Notebook runs on Broadway a year, flop. By flop, by the way, I am not making an artistic judgment.
Right. It's a business term.
Yeah. It doesn't recoup its costs on Broadway. So let's say they lost $15 million. It's going to go out and tour, and I have a feeling it's going to do very nicely. And the tour will cost another $5 million. They will recoup their $5 million, and they'll make a nice profit. Let's say they make $3 or $4 or $5 million. Great.
Right.
They did not recoup 15.
Right.
So it's not as if the tour can recoup Broadway losses, but the tour can do well.
Right.
So the producers have to add up. Where are they? And what I'm saying is the biggest problem of our business, in my opinion, is those costs in New York are so high that the producers can't make a living. And at some point, it's going to hurt the development of new work.
But there's also this thing, it goes back to the very first thing we were talking about, which is, sort of defining what a producer does and how one becomes a producer. I mean, I am constantly meeting people who say, I produced Hamilton, or I produced blah, blah, and I go, wait, I've never heard of you before. It's a term that has been bandied about to draw investors in, I think, and make them feel like they've got a stake and a reputational stake in what's going on the stage, which is not a bad thing. But they're not real producers; they're investors.
Yes. All that has changed is that all those people that Hal Prince would send a letter to and they'd send him some money somehow now have their name above the title.
Got it.
And they are calling themselves producers. What can I say? Our business can't live without them because they're the ones putting up the money. And right now, the money is still flowing such that we can have 12 new musicals this season. And we all know of those 12 new musicals, 10 of them are going to be flops. And I haven't even seen most of them, but I'm just telling you, mathematically, 10 of them are going to be flops. No question about it.
And we keep trying to rationalize all this at the same time that the numbers of people, that are seeing the shows, if you're up at upwards of 13 million people, the numbers, people are coming back to the theater. The proposition just seems for investment is, or if it's done out of passion, God love you. If that's, if you don't expect to get a return on what you've put in, and maybe that's what most people conclude, but something is off in a business where the number of people, the demand is there, but making all these enterprises, I guess, float above the break even line is, maybe that's just a truism of the business, that it will always be more flops than hits.
Well, it always was. It always will be. And if you asked me what is our single What is the one thing we are missing on Broadway right now more than any? What is our biggest problem? What do we need more than anything else right now? We need a Hamilton-sized hit.
Right.
We normally get 2 of those a decade, maybe 3, maybe 3, sometimes 4. Right? If you look at the 90s, you get Rent, Chicago, and The Lion King. 3 blockbusters in one decade.
Yeah.
Look at the first decade of the 20th century, and you have Wicked and Jersey Boys and Mamma Mia. And I might be leaving. I mean,
Hairspray? Not Hairspray. Hairspray?
does not qualify. Sorry, it's
Solid,
it's a
but
good
not
hit.
a mega.
No.
Oh, it's interesting. You counting Jersey Boys as a mega?
Oh, yeah. That was huge.
Mega hit.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
And I'm just using math. It's just math.
Right. Yeah. It's not a quality
Correct.
call. It's like, okay, it's numbers.
And then you look at the first decade, you look at 2010 to 20, and you have Mormon and you have Hamilton.
Interesting.
We have not had one like that since Hamilton.
Fascinating.
And we're 10 years old this summer.
Amazing.
Now, granted,
Yeah,
we had COVID in the middle.
Sure.
But COVID was an 18-month problem or a 2-year problem. It wasn't a 5-year problem. And where is it? And it will lift all boats when it comes. And God knows, I hope I'm the producer of it.
So speaking of, we should let you go, Jeffrey. But what's on your plate? Are you how actively are you looking for the next Hamilton?
The answer is I am actively developing 2 new musicals that I feel inspired by and optimistic about right now, but I don't talk about them until they're real. And I'm actually going to do, for the first time ever, a play. It really is the first time. I'm going to do a play soon, an original play.
Wow.
Hopefully in about a year on Broadway as well. So I'm actively developing 3 new things and maybe 5 new things. So, as I say in my book, I'm a student of musical theater. I'm still trying to make a good one. And I really, really, really want to make another good one.
I so enjoy reading your book because there was always this thing, even when it was a show that I personally was not crazy about, but like there's always this drive to find and to get it right and to make it work. And I love that. It feels like basically the whole Mickey and Judy thing of like, let's put on a show, let's make it happen against all odds. Like it's something that I feel is very palpable in the book. So I was like, okay, I'm going to turn that page and like more and more and more. And I read it really fast. And I think the Rent thing has become so part of the lore of the show. It really is such a part of it. But the show did not need that to be what it is, to succeed and be incredibly influential and launch a million careers. And that comes across so well in the book. I'm kind of gushing now, but like I really like the nuts and bolts books, and especially one where the origin story starts with a trip to New York where you see Dreamgirls and Torch Song Trilogy, and and there's like the stories like that of kids who come to New York and see a show, and then they go back to wherever, and they're like, yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do the next Hamilton or Rent or. It's really inspiring, despite the 20 million price tag and the. But before we go, I have a question for you. A lot of people now talk about star casting. Do you think star casting has become kind of necessary for some shows, or can a show succeed?
Yeah.
Especially a play, I think.
Elizabeth, first of all, thank you for those very kind words, which I deeply appreciate. I think that we love having stars on Broadway, and the audience loves having stars on Broadway. And we are so lucky right now to have the likes of Jake Gyllenhaal and George Clooney and Denzel Washington on Broadway. It's good when it's part of the landscape, but it can only be part of the landscape. Broadway is ultimately driven by new musicals, period. That's what drives our entire business. And I know from my experience, when I do a new musical, I want star talent, but I don't want stars because they don't want to commit to a full year or more on Broadway. And I remember reading about Michael Bennett saying only big talent in Dreamgirls, but not stars. And that made a very strong impression on me. And your problem is if you have Lauren Bacall in Woman of the Year, what are you going to do when she moves?
Right.
Right.
Now, granted, they got Raquel Welch, and that actually served them a little bit. But musicals are driven by musical theater actors who are not stars, notwithstanding the grace and phenomenal talent and all the things Hugh Jackman and those folks bring to our business.
Well, Jeffrey, one of the things that's nice to talk to you, it's nice to talk to you and have you on is, I think that you've earned this over the last 25 years or more, a stellar show. It might, there were Merrick shows and there were Prince shows and Cameron shows. Now there are Jeffrey Sellers shows. And that's one of the reasons that Theater Kid, a Broadway memoir, feels like something that every theater lover or every other aspirant to your job would really dig.
Thank you so much, Peter. It's always a delight to talk. Now, can I ask you guys a question?
Of course.
Peter,
yes.
You said to me, about over 10 years ago, we critics, we've written a review by intermission. Do you remember saying that?
I do.
I've held that ever since. And I've quoted you, and I would like to know from you, Elizabeth, and you, do you still, but by the way, Elizabeth, you might disagree with that completely, but is that still true?
For me, it is. Totally. I know, believe me, in my gut, if you haven't won me over by intermission, you can send me home with a goodie bag and I'll go write my review. But yes, I think that's if you haven't grabbed me in the first hour of your enterprise, it ain't gonna happen in the second hour.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say the review is not written, but I would say I know within 15 minutes, 20, if it's going to be good or bad.
Yeah.
Like really, you know very, very fast.
Well, you know what? That's similar to when an actor walks in the room to audition, we always know like within seconds. Not if they're going to get the part, but we know they're not going to get it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Jimmy Niederlander Sr. said to me years ago, I had lunch with him at Gallagher's Steakhouse, of course, and he said to me, he always goes to the first preview. And I said, why? He said, because you got what you got. And, that was as much wisdom as I was going to glean from Jimmy Sr. that day, but it said it all. And I think there's truth in that.
Peter, I've got to say, but your Jimmy Nederlander sounds a little bit like your friend Weisler. I'm just gonna.
No, Fran's a little more darling. Anyway, so anyway, Jeffrey, it's a pleasure to have you on. Elizabeth will continue to critique my impressions, but thank you for spending this time with us.
What a fun time. May we all continue to thrive and find musicals that inspire us.
Beautifully said.
Absolutely. Wow, another one. I'm losing track with all those brilliant podcasts of ours. But there's another. I love the nuts and bolts one about the business of Broadway, regardless of what might think, what I thought of Rent back in 1996 when I was young and sitting on the stairs at New York Theater Workshop. But clearly I do not have a business bone in my body, so I don't have that special producer.
Well, there's also at different times of one's life, what you love and what you come to love changes.
That's true.
It's how, and certainly there have been times, and we could even talk about that sometime, about when, because people always ask, did you have you ever changed your mind about a show?
So true.
And we can certainly explore that question.
We should talk. Yeah. I'm very curious to hear what shows you used to love and then they shrunk on you, or the reverse.
Yeah, sure.
The ones
my
that grew
God.
on you.
Absolutely. Those, and I've come to admire the art, the craftsmanship, the artistry of shows that maybe at one time were part of my childhood and I thought were old hat, and I've come to realize are so beautifully constructed and and put together. So yes, that of course evolves.
Okay, we're gonna put that on the back burner. All right, so you can leave a comment about this or episode or anything on our podcast page, marksvincentelli.substack.com, or reach out on social media. I'm on Blue Sky.
And I'm on Threads, Facebook, and Blue Sky. Thanks for listening. And until the next episode, I'm Peter Marks.
And I'm Elizabeth Vincentelli. We'll see you soon at the theater.